Okay, well, we've been looking at our D.H. Lawrence friend here, and we were talking about what a good natural writer he was, and how I'm sure he just like wrote this off in like a day or two one day when he came back from the trip, when it was all fresh in his mind. And, I'm sure he didn't correct it. I'm sure he didn't have a computer word processing. You know, I'm sure he just wrote it out. Because he writes it the way a person walks. And we were also talking about what an interesting person he is. Okay, you guys, I'll tell you what. You're going to go make your phone go outside, and you can actually telephone each other. Put you on this side and hit her over there. You can talk back and forth on your cell phone with each other. It's a really exciting thing. So he's in a way that we were talking about last time. He's the first flower child, isn't he? I mean, talk about flower children in this country, and of course, I guess you guys aren't flower children anymore. Real estate is too expensive now to be a flower child. So, you know, if you got to buy a home at some point or rent something for $500,000, I mean, for me, $500,000 on this, $800,000, you're supposed to be a millionaire to pay those kind of prices. So, you know, people have to kind of work themselves to the grindstone just to survive in a maelstrom of that kind. So, I mean, flower children, I mean, you know, how can flower children survive in such a situation? It's impossible. So there were some flower children running around in the 60s, as you know. But I think that the oil crunch probably destroyed them. I mean, I don't think it was that their ideas were necessarily wrong, or but they were trying to, the life they were trying to lead was not attractive. I think, you know, I really do think that the price of oil just priced them out of business. Because, you know, inflation started right around that time in the early 70s, when the oil embargoes, the oil prices began to hit. Right after, during and after the Vietnam War and the aftermath of the Vietnam War. So, the only place I know of any flower children now is up in Eugene, Oregon, if you've ever been up that way. There seem to be a lot of tie-dye people still hanging around up there. How many have been to Eugene in any time recently? There's still some of them up there, aren't there? I mentioned it in our talking about pizza, that there's a vegetarian restaurant up there. So, that would be the Hare Krishna movie, but still there are a lot of tie-dye people hanging around up there. So, what is it about Lawrence that makes him a kind of flower child? He has a flower sensibility. He cares about flowers. You say, oh, I'm a man, I don't care about flowers. Well, maybe you don't. But you know, you'll find that women actually do. I mean, I'm not generalizing, but it's a fact. And they, as he says, you can get far further in life with delicate sensibility than stopping people to death. And I think particularly where they used to call it the fairer sex, I don't know what you want to call it these days, but you're not even supposed to distinguish between sexes anymore, so I mean it's really tough for me to talk about the subject. But particularly where the other sex is concerned, they react very well, I think, to delicate sensibility. They like something that is both delicate sensibility and also has a certain strength to it. But I don't think they react well to brutality and so on and so forth. So, I mean, if you're a man here, I mean, it doesn't mean you have to go become, it doesn't mean you have to sort of become totally feminine or something like that. That's the word you want to use. It's a delicate area. But I think you will find you will be much more appreciated as a person who combines all these characteristics. And that's why I say Lawrence seems to do that. And of all the people that we've encountered, he perhaps would be the most fun to be with as a person. If you think of the people that we've encountered, and that's not everybody in the universe, we've maybe encountered 5 or 6 people here, but still, as a person, he would be really fun to spend some time with. I think you'll see it here. He's intelligent, he's sensitive, he's not a weakling, you know, he's got definite ideas, he knows about things, he's self-taught, and so on. And he's extremely lively, and he reacts to his environment with a tremendous sensitivity. So, having said all that, he goes into this town, he's leaving Rome. Where is he going to? Cerveteri or Cerveteri, however you want to. I've actually brought some markers today. Put something on the board for you guys. So he actually is going to this town or place, Cerveteri or Cerveteri. I find it easier to say. I think Italians do say Cerveteri, but I find Cerveteri rolls off my tongue better. So if you permit me to mispronounce it, I will. Sometimes it's more fun to mispronounce things than to say it the correct way. He's going to Cerveteri. It's more like what an English word would sound like. And what's in Cerveteri? Tombs. Tumuli. And whose tumuli are they? The remains of Etruscan civilization. You have pictures of them in some of your books, right? So the word is tumuli. So he goes out and he's on the way to a place called Lattice Poli. Suppose they take a bus or a train or something. Anyway, they get off, they're still about 10 miles or 10 kilometers from where they want to get to, these tombs at Cerveteri, and of course, there's no way to get there. And the bus has already come, it's sitting in the town, it's not going anywhere. He goes into a cafe or a little restaurant, into a sort of, I guess you would say it's not a grotto, but a kind of downstairs sort of place in a cavern of some kind, where people are eating and the food is pretty bad. And what does he see in this cavern, pretty useless place, restaurant? He sees the Faun Man. And what is the Faun Man? The Faun Man is natural man, not deadened by morals, as he puts it, right? That doesn't really exist necessarily except in Lawrence's imagination, right? Not deadened by morals. Where does he get that idea, not deadened by morals, from? I told you last time, didn't I? Nietzsche. Beyond Good and Evil. Nietzsche was the popular writer of the late 19th century. See, and now, you know, we actually have a pen here, so we can actually write it up on the board. There we go. Friedrich Nietzsche. He wrote Twilight of the Gods, or the Idols, I think, I can't remember. He wrote Thus Spake Zarathustra, where he tried to get a non-Semitic prophet. He chose he wrote it in verse. He chose a Persian prophet because that was what the scholars in the late 19th century were calling Indo-European civilization. So these were Indo-European languages. So he wanted to get Zoroastrian. I think nowadays people probably didn't want a Persian prophet, but he wanted to get a non-Semitic prophet, if you want to call it that, not Arab, not Jewish, not one of the other ones from the Middle East. He wanted to get an Aryan, if you like, prophet, somewhat of a disciple of Wagner and so on. So he put all of his ideas, like Plato did Socrates, into Zarathustra. It's pretty rambling, I think, pretty rubbishy stuff, but it still was very captivating to people at that time, and mostly it is celebrating the artist as the creator of meaning in life. The artist is the creator. And Joyce, James Joyce, if you know him in literature, he has a soliloquy at the end of Ulysses, where Molly Bloom, the character, is talking about all her sexual exploits. How many have read that book? Well, if you've ever taken a literature course, you would have read James Joyce. He's considered to be the greatest writer in modern English language. So if you've never read James Joyce, I mean, you basically are showing that you are not extremely well read. Not that I think James Joyce is interesting necessarily to read, but some things you read just because you're supposed to. You're supposed to know that you're a civilized, cultured person. So, for instance, you know Darwin because you're supposed to know Darwin. You know Karl Marx because you're supposed to know Karl Marx. You know Whitman because you're supposed to know Whitman. Well, if you know Joyce because you're supposed to know Joyce. Or if you like James Baldwin or something, but Joyce is he's much more celebrated than someone like James Baldwin. So, if you want to read a simple Joyce, which is attractive and pleasant, read Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. That would be. But in that, he announces his Nietzschean purpose. He wants to create the uncreated conscience of his race. He's an Irishman. He's going abroad, exiling himself, and the final message there is to create. All this is Nietzschean stuff. So Lawrence is influenced by Nietzsche too. Nazism is influenced by Nietzsche in a negative way. I don't think that it really represents him. He has another book called The Antichrist. He's the one who pronounced God is dead. People talk about the God is dead philosophy. That's all from Nietzsche. But a very influential person in the late 19th century. So at the end of Ulysses, Molly Bloom is saying, yes, 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 yes. He's affirming life. That's the big Nietzschean idea, to affirm life. Well, Lawrence is affirming life in this book, and he has a philosophy or a religion of life. Life, not death. This is from a man who is basically a dying man, the latter stages of tuberculosis. So, but yet he's so full of life that it's really astonishing. Anyway, so this fawn man who he describes on page, I guess, is it your page 3 to 4, or is it your page 11 to 12? What is it in your book?
11 and 12.
11 and 12, okay, we'll stick to your 11, because I've had 3 different versions of this book, so they keep publishing new ones all the time. Anyway, he says he wouldn't survive the last war. What war does he mean? He'd be sure not to survive such a war. What is the war? The First World War. Why wouldn't you survive if you were someone of delicate sensibility, natural person? Because you're living in a trench and you're fighting bloodthirsty, horrifying, mechanical trench warfare for like year after year after year after year. Such a person can't survive in that kind of modern Holocaust, horrendous environment. In his view, that was the way he puts it. So he says they were all killed in the last war. He doesn't really mean they were all killed in the last war. Obviously, they weren't all killed in the last war. And obviously, such a person doesn't even exist. It only exists in his imagination as what he considers to be the perfect natural type of man. And Lawrence, unlike a lot of feminism today, is celebrating men. And manhood. Not manliness as such, but gorgeous men. Beautiful men. Sensitive men. Vital, vibrant. So again, it's pretty unique term, pretty unique term for a self-educated person from England. So again, we're in the realm of a religious prophet sort of person. He is obviously totally religious. Anyway, he embeds it in this in this narrative here. So, probably when I go south again, he will have disappeared. They can't survive the fawn-faced man. The girl of the cavern, a nice girl but a bad cook, had found us a guide, her brother. And he's going to take us to the necropolis. Should be page 12. What's a necropolis? What's a necropolis?
Dead city.
Where the dead are. It's a city where all the dead are. So it's not a living city, it's a dead city, like you said, yeah. Very good. Where the tombs are. Yeah, this is a funny scene too. He's a young boy of 14 or so, and he's shy and suspicious. And suddenly he comes back with another boy. And, you know, Lawrence is with someone he calls B. He doesn't name him, but he's with a guy, a friend of his. They're traveling together, a guy called B. And he says here, B and I are two quite, quiet-mannered, very harmless people. But the first boy could not have borne to go alone with us. Look how well he writes, not alone. He would have been afraid as if he were in the dark. Has to have someone with him. Couldn't just go with us. He has to bring friends. I always tell a story. I don't have a lot of time left in this course to do that, but if you ever do go traveling like this, don't let the guide bring a friend along. That's all I can tell you. I was in Syria at one point, and I was going out to a place called Aleppo, and I was looking at ruins of Ebla and places like that, and then I went out to a famous place in the Syrian desert called Palmyra, which was on the caravan route to northern Iraq. This was before the Iraq War, when things were a little bit calmer out that way. And the guide wanted to bring a friend along. The guide was, you don't drive in these countries, you let him drive. So he said, oh, I'm bringing my friend. And that was bad. It was 2 against 1, you see. And I tell you this, I frankly barely survived with my life. That's all I can tell you. And those guys would have cut my throat if they could have, had gotten away with it. They wouldn't have been willing to do it singly, but with 2 there, yes. And I can tell you, just don't let someone bring a friend along if they're taking you somewhere. Make them go alone with you. You're much safer, and you're much more liable to get where you're going. Because the second person reinforces the first in his or her bad vibe or design. And frankly, I'll never forget that, and I just pass it on to you for what it's worth. As this reminds me of, these are just little boys, and he says, not alone, he would have been afraid to go on. This is a different thing, obviously, than Lawrence is talking about here. Okay, so he describes everything on page 13. Etruscans built everything of wood, houses, temples, all save the fortifications, gates, bridges, and so on. And the Etruscan cities vanished like what? As flowers. Always the flower imagery. Why are we reading this? Because we want to get his philosophy of the environment, his philosophy of sexuality, his religion, if you want, of sexuality, his religion of the how does he put it so well? Not just vitality, but the instant moment, as he calls it, the quick of life. It's a unique thing with him. The quick of life. He looks at the paintings. If you've read this, I hope some of you have read it, not depend on me for everything. When he sees in them the natural quick of life, which society is trying to kill in us. Because we only live once. And we want to be alive in that time. We don't want, he said, as he puts it, not deadened by morals. Whether morals dead in some or not, I can't say. But in the Victorian, post-Victorian era, in the early 20th century, I suppose that's the way it was. Now things have swung too much on the other side. Now we're deadened by pornography. So it goes back and forth, swings back and forth. Lawrence is part of the cause, as I told you, of our pornographic world. And I think we'll tell you about the phalluses that are standing out in front of all these places. And he also speaks about lingam, and I don't even know what such words meant before I read Lawrence. And frankly, I really want to know, but if you want to find out what it means, go look it up in a dictionary. It's a phallic symbol of some kind. How many have, again, you haven't traveled much, I know. Have you ever been to Pompeii, southern Italy? Well, you almost get knocked over by, can I be crude? I'm crude anyway, it's true, I apologize. But by penises sticking out of walls. You're walking along and then you go, bonk! This is the way Roman cities were like. They sold these things on street corners. You know, this is what they were like. The place was totally pornographic. And I'm not celebrating it, it's kind of revolting. Or you go into a house and there's a huge phallus in the courtyard sitting in front of you as you walk in. You know, Pompeii was covered by ash, and it was preserved the way it actually was. So, I mean, I kid you not. The word for there was a word for those things sticking out of buildings. Oh, God. I think they were called Hermes. H-E-R-M-E-S, like the god Hermes. I think that's maybe. I think they're Hermes. Maybe Hermes, but I thought it was Hermes. This is the way things work. So I also told you about the flowers here. You see, they didn't want to be far away from the dead, he says on 14. So opposite, on a parallel hill to where the actual land is, you have these tombs, like bowls, like flower bowls, he says, underground. So they built their cities on a narrow plateau or headland above the surrounding country. And then across the way, there was this necropolis world, because they didn't want to be that far away from their beloved ones. And he goes, he passes some women washing in the stream. And of course, he's always imagining these kinds of things as the meaning. Here's his view of women. Next page, I think 14. They are good-looking women of the old world with that very attractive look of noiselessness and inwardness. I've got to tell you. Again, I've done a lot of traveling, as you can see, but one of the worst things in the world, I guess you can see here in America, is meeting American tourists overseas. Now, I like Americans, I really do. I know Americans are great in their own environment, but they're awful out of their own environment. And now, don't get angry at me, you young ladies in the room, but the most sort of thing that hits you hardest, how should I put it, not strikes you, but grates on you, is that when you get in a group of Americans and the women are yakking at the top of their lungs. And the men are like, you said, no, come on, men aren't like that, American men. Go overseas, go overseas. That's all I can tell you. And I'm not trying to criticize anything, but I'm trying to do that to show you that this is exactly the opposite of what he likes. Now, I'm not saying he's perfect, but this is something, the attractive look of noiselessness and inwardness, you know. Just if you're a woman and you're overseas, or even in here, you know, maybe don't do that at the top of your voice, you know, at a table, so everyone in the restaurant can hear you, whatever it is that you're going on. Well, men do that too. You said, no, American men overseas are quite subdued, I notice. I agree here in a sports bar, they're pretty crude. But, you know, overseas they seem to be, they're kind of frightened. Anyway, take it for what it's worth. I don't, all generalities have exceptions and they fall apart, but it may be of some use to you. I'm trying to explain Lawrence, an inwardness which women must have had in the past, as if within the woman there were again something to seek that eye can never search out, something that can be lost but can never be found, something mysterious in the woman. It's not all hanging out there, you know. It's all something, you know, inward, something that he sees in these women. If you've been down to Mexico or places like that, you'll see women washing in streams in some places. And, I don't see what he sees, but And the verbena, we mentioned last time, you know, forget-me-nots, mignonette, the sweet scent, and then the boys, when he talks to them, the guys, you know, what's that flower? And what's the answer the boys give him?
Flower.
Florence. It smells, it stinks. Okay, that's the usual dumbbell answer. That's not what Lawrence wants to hear. He said, well, he's a jerk then. No, I'm not sure he's a jerk. And he can name the things like asphodel. Now, I'm not a special person. I don't know what an asphodel is any more than you do. Now, I'm sure maybe 5% of you may know who like flowers. But I like the fact that he knows. You know, I find that impressive. I don't know if you guys find that impressive, that he can name the flowers. And if you could name the flowers, I think that you'd be a pretty impressive person too. So I wouldn't say that you should put that down. Maybe you should you know, take some lessons from it. Pink, spasmodic, and then he goes on for a whole paragraph. These asphodels are very noticeable, a great feature in the coast landscape. I thought the boy surely would have a name for it, but no, sheepishly they make the same answer. Fiore, poots, it's a flower, it stinks. Both facts, of course, being self-evident, there was no contradicting it, though the smell of asphodel, and then he goes on about the whole smell. And then he goes on about how it's not, it's tall, it's not like the tall and mysterious lily, no, this sparky, assertive flower with just a touch of the onion. You see how you can go on about a flower? That is, you will admit, that is fairly unique for a man. It's not so unique for Englishmen, you know, because you know what Englishmen and women, but particularly English, they love their gardens and they cultivate their gardens, and it's like for some, it's like not just a passion, it's an obsession. They get so into their gardens that, you know, and the different things they're growing in their gardens. I mean, men I'm talking about, not just women. Particularly, in fact, men even more than women in some cases. So this is not an abnormal thing for England, but I think for most of us, it's probably pretty different. And look, he goes on about the narcissus in the next paragraph. The polyanthus narcissus is pure Mediterranean. And the wild daffodil he talks about, but the daffodil, well, you know, and he's going on about the asphodel again, proud and sparky, etc., etc. It's throwing out sparks of her stamens. I believe it was just this that the Greeks saw, and he put saw in italics, meaning they see the inwardness of things. Here you see his environmentalism. You talk about why are we reading Lawrence? Because he combines sexuality with environmentalism. You say, what's environmental? He's totally sensitive to the natural world. He doesn't think it should be crushed over with freeways. Now, I'm not saying it shouldn't be crushed over with freeways. I'm not taking a position. I'm just saying he would be against crushing the natural world with freeways and asphalt and whatever. You know, and I think that it presages the situation we find ourselves in with people who are green parties in Europe and people who are totally obsessed with these things in our own day. So he anticipates this. There's nobody else who has this sensibility that is writing in this early time in a religious way, which is why Etruscan Places is such a really interesting book. And it's not a book, it's a quick essay, sort of like James Baldwin's. Okay, so, we're on page 16 or so. He talks about the Grand Canyon, he's been everywhere. And then we can now we're seeing the mounds, the base of the stone masonry, the great girdles of carved and beveled stone. And I've been there, and they aren't really quite impressive. And you know, I can't even name what's around them because I'm a dumbbell. But the green growing vegetation around them, that's the best I can do, folks. It's actually really quite pleasant. And The mounds, between us and the mounds are barbed wire fences. And the notice says, don't tip the guides. The boys run to the new little concrete house just by, and bring the guide, and there's another guide, a youth with red eyes and bandaged. So they walked all the way. Now most people I know in this environment here, my kids wouldn't even walk over to the high school. You know, the high school was like, I would say 3/4 of a mile away. They wouldn't walk to the high school. Someone had to drive them there. What? Walk to the high school? Walk back? You gotta be kidding. You know, we don't walk 3/4 of a mile every day. You know, this guy walks 10 miles just to see some mountains. You know, most people I think in this class, and most of them, I'm not criticizing you, I hope you realize that, I'm just pointing out the difference. If you got to this place and they said, okay, now you got to walk 10 miles to get out to this place, what would you do? Well, you'd get on the bus and go back to Rome. Yeah, that's what you do. Like that 3/4. You say you would do that too, Professor Eisenman. No. If I really wanted to get to the mountains, man, I'd get there. That's all I can tell you. I would get there. And he was determined to. I walked to the hills of northern Galilee. I walked to some Arab villages, which were 10 miles from the place that I was working in, because I did want to get to these kinds of places alone in the hills. I would get there. So I understand what he's talking about. But, you know, I have to want to get there. And so, anyway, so listen to how he describes it. There's a quiet, queer stillness and a curious, peaceful repose about the Etruscan places. You see, and that's why he's calling it what? Etruscan places. Because that's the name of the book, and that's what he's talking about. The Etruscan place I have been to. He's been to a lot of other places. Different from the weirdness of Celtic places. You know, in England there are these old Celtic stone circles and things you may or may not know about. Rome, which he considers repellent. The rather abhorrent kind of repelling sort of thing of the Great Pyramid places in Mexico. He's been to the Great Pyramids, and look at this guy, he's been everywhere. It's only the 1920s, and there were no jet planes. So he's been to all these places, and he did it with a rucksack on his back. Remember he describes the rucksack at the railroad station, and nobody will take it because it doesn't have a key. And he leaves it at the coffee bar or something because the guy's willing to take it. Any case, he's been to Teotihuacan and Cholula and Mitla in the south. Teotihuacan. I've been to Teotihuacan. Have you been to Teotihuacan? It's a huge place north of Mexico City. You know, really huge pyramids there. I mean, like as big as the Egyptian pyramids. You know, it's reconstructed. If you go to Mexico, you certainly should go to Teotihuacan. And further south in Mexico is Oaxaca, where they're having all the social unrest at the moment. And I forget the name of the town on the hillside above Oaxaca. But they have the same pyramids there, and even more, to my mind, spectacular because they haven't been reconstructed. I can't remember the name of the place above Oaxaca, but Lawrence lived in Oaxaca, so he knows about these places. He lived in Lake Chapala, lived in Oaxaca. He knows about all these. So you see, he knows quite a lot. He knows more than almost anyone you meet knows through personal experience. Mitla, Cholula, those are down by Cancun area, the Mayan sort of places out inland from Cancun. You know, everyone goes to Cancun to sort of, play around, drink, whatever they do in those places. But the real place to go is inland, in the jungle areas where they have these Mayan ruins. That would be Mitla and Cholula. He's been to the Buddha temples in Ceylon. What's the difference here? In this little weird place here in Nowheresville that no one's ever heard of, there is a stillness and a softness and those great grassy mounds with their ancient stone girdles, and down the central walls there lingers still a kind of homeliness. Something simple, something pleasant. Yeah.
It's called Sri Lanka now.
Yeah, but I know that, but he's calling it Ceylon.
That's a British name right there.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's not Bombay, it's Mumbai, so, but we're reading it, but okay. You guys, my friend here wants you to know it's not Ceylon anymore. That's a colonial name, it's Sri Lanka. But anyway. Okay. It's close, okay. It wasn't the point. The point is that here, there's something gentle, soft, just homely, and not overpowering. He doesn't want overpowering. He wants things that are human size. True, it was a still, sunny afternoon in April, and larks rose from the soft green grass of the dunes. Yeah, that's right, there is green grass over on the dunes. But there was a stillness and a soothingness. Here's a man who's close to death, but he can describe what it is that he's touched by. A soothingness in the air, in that sunken place. And here's the point, which is what I'm trying to drive home to you from his work. And a feeling that it was good for one's soul to be there. Now this, you see, is religious stuff. To my mind, real religious stuff, not fake religious stuff. You know, you can't describe what it is about some places. And I'm sure if we had the time, I could ask you, are there some places that you've been that you just feel it was good for your soul to be there? You know, that's a quiet thing. That's something between you and the place, between you and your soul. And I'm sure you're sitting and saying, are there some places that just feel that it's good for my soul to be there? Look, I just walked down by the marina in Long Beach here, where I do a lot of my work. I have a little boat there, which I work on to get away from the noise. It was quite quiet down there. I never take the boat out because I would crash into things. But that's how I got involved in this struggle over the herons and the palm trees there that was featured in the Long Beach Press Telegram over the last year or two, and it's still going on. But the point is that even tonight I walked around there, and the sun was going down, and it was totally still, and it was absolutely stupendous sunset, and the birds and various things that were flying there. You know, it was just felt good for your soul to be there. Now, it's in the middle of this raucous environment here, but still, that just is an example of something very near. You know, I don't feel it's good for my soul to walk out on the campus here. Forgive me if I don't, when I walk out on the quad, I was, oh my. It's good for my soul to be here. No, I don't feel, I can't tell you guys that. One or two of you want to communicate a place that you've been that you felt it was good for your soul to be there before we rush on and out the only one who hogs everything? Yeah.
Grand Canyon.
Yeah, Grand Canyon. See, I've never been down in it, so I don't know. But from the top or down in it?
The top.
The top.
There, and I looked, and there was this big, huge hole in the ground, and it sort of looks like the pictures on the postcard, but just being there was
Did
a
something.
quiet moment for
Did
myself.
something. Did something. Yeah. And what were you saying, Grand Canyon?
Is it,
did?
you have to go to the North Rim like in October when there's no one there. It's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
Santorini Island in Greece.
Yeah, I can imagine. I've heard about Santorini.
Everything is white and blue.
Yeah, and yeah, Santorini is where they had the volcanic cataclysmic sort of episode that kind of exploded and left a huge sort of crater in the harbor of the place, and they got Greek houses all built around it. So, not in the tourist season, I don't think, huh?
Excuse me?
Not in the tourist season, I don't think, huh? It's okay even then?
Yes.
Okay, all right, you got me. I've been in boats through that area. I've been past Santorini, I've been in Crete and places like that. And I've been on Hydra, and I've been on Samos, and I've been a lot of those places. I've never been to Santorini, so I can't say. No, one last place anyone wants to talk about that. Yeah.
I think this one's closer. It's on the top of Signal Hill, or wherever it is.
Really? Yeah, you found a
it's
place
this little
there.
park. You gotta be there in the morning though, when there's no one there, and the sun's just rising, and you look over Long Beach, and it feels pretty good.
Yeah, well, there you go. What?
Oh, the cops come by and ticket you real fast.
Well, the cops, It's not good for your soul to be in that situation. All right, last foreign or more distant place then, before we pack it in?
Forest Lake, Minnesota.
Where?
Forest Lake, Minnesota.
Oh, you're kidding us.
Yosemite.
Where?
Yosemite, going through the tunnel and then
Oh,
you see
Yosemite,
the.
yeah. All right, let's go back to Forest Lake, Minnesota. We all know Yosemite, so we can. What's about Forest Lake, Minnesota?
It's a little town in Minnesota.
Yeah.
There's a lake there, and it's real quiet. And
You got loons there?
there's loons there.
Yeah, loons or something. How many have heard of loon? Once you've heard a loon, you will never forget the sound of a loon. That's all I can tell you. Go somewhere, that's why I asked her, because go anywhere in the north, whether it's Minnesota, Maine, or whatever, on lakes, inland lakes with freshwater lakes, you'll find loons. I can tell you, man, you'll never forget the sound of the loon. That's all.
So the mosquitoes should be there, safer.
Well, we can skip the mosquitoes. All right, so that's what Lawrence is talking about. You see, a place that is just good for your soul to be there. I went there. He was asked, by the way, about this place that he's talking about. That's all I can tell you. I didn't expect that it would be that way, but it was. So you see, now Lawrence has got you into this. You see, despite yourself saying, "Oh, this is a cornball." No, you see, he's getting to you. Let's let him do more work here. So they go down into this tomb, and they're surprisingly big and handsome. These homes of the dead, just like houses. And then he goes on the next paragraph. This, not like Rome, where the slaves were always burned, presumably, whereas at Chirvetri, the masters were laid full length, sometimes in great stone sarcophagi, and so on. And then you can read that yourself. The whole thing suggests Egypt, but on the whole, here all is plain, simple, not like pretentious pyramids or tombs of the pharaoh. No decoration, and here it is. Here it is again. This is what we're looking for in his book. This is the religion we're speaking of the phallic consciousness, as he calls it. Easy, natural proportions, whose beauty one hardly notices, that comes so naturally, physically. It's the natural beauty of proportion of the phallic consciousness, contrasted with the more studied or ecstatic proportion of the mental or spiritual consciousness we are all so accustomed to. He said we are accustomed to. You see, what's he attacking here? You wouldn't know it, but he's actually attacking Nietzsche. Nietzsche wrote a book called Birth of Tragedy, where he talked about the Apollonian and the Dionysiac consciousnesses. And he compared the world. The Apollonian, Apollo, was the intellectual consciousness. The Dionysiac was the frenzied sort of consciousness. For Lawrence, that's all, pardon me for being crude, I don't have a lot of time here today, Greek bullshit. You know, this is something even more important to him. It's the phallic consciousness that someone like Nietzsche, as he sees it, wouldn't have even known what it was. So he's picking up, but he's competing. So I have to move along. There are the writings on the wall, on the burial niches, little sentences freely written in red paint or black, you'll find where I am, or scratched in the stucco. We can read the debonair inscriptions and so on and so forth. And in one place here, he's talking about the next page, I guess it is 19 or so, 18 or 19. There are helmets, swords, spears, shoes, belts, necklaces. This is what's written. This was painted on the carvings and so on, and on the walls. And then the sacred drinking bowl, the scepter, the dog who is man's guardian even on the death journey, the two lions that stand by the gateway of life and death. And here he goes again. The triton, or the merman, and the goose, the bird that swims on the waters and thrusts its head deep into the flood of the beginning and the end. Now, where does he come up with a sentence like that? How does he know what a goose symbolizes? He didn't learn it at any university lecture, I can tell you that. And he may not even be true, but he intuits it. He sees what they felt, and he puts it like that. Look, would you see a goose like that? He says the goose, and all through this essay is like that. The goose, and I hope some of you read this essay for yourself. How many have read it? Yeah. Well, I don't know if you can pick this stuff out as easily as I can do it for you, but with your reading it and my picking it out, I think a double whammy there, you'll see the stuff that we're looking for, which is why we have Jen here tonight, because we want her to be an expert on this material too. See? And the goose, the bird that swims on the waters and thrusts its head deep into the flood at the beginning and the end. I don't know where he got that. I'll go along. Fine, if that's what it is, okay. You got me, Lawrence. I'll take your word for it, because I couldn't describe it any better than you. So if you see it, that's cool. The tombs are so easy and friendly. See, we're not afraid of death here. We're not trying to get some punishment, underworld, all this kind of stuff. We're not trying to, overcome death and all this. No, it's all friendly, easy. One doesn't feel oppressed. It must be partly owing, here again, another thing, the peculiar charm of natural proportion, which is in all, it's not like the Greeks, all impressive, mathematically perfect. I mean, I do like Greek things, and most of us do, but he's saying there's another thing. Natural proportion, which is in all Etruscan things of the unspoiled, unromanized centuries before the Romans came and crushed and ruined the world. There's a simplicity combined with the most peculiar, and here it is, free-breasted naturalness. You see, he's a modern person. He's like many of us. We want natural things. And spontaneity in the shapes and movements of the underworld walls and the spaces. Here, he starts criticizing the Greeks. No one ever criticizes the Greeks. The Greeks are perfect. The Greeks are wonderful. The Greeks are the greatest civilization that ever existed, not Lawrence. He's an original spirit. The Greeks sought to make an impression. In Gothic, the Roman church built upon Greco-Roman ideas, still more seeks to impress. Big Gothic cathedrals in Europe, you go in here, oh, look at this arch, and look at this mighty thing, and you feel puny. You're just a little jerk in this overwhelming, cathedral. You are sort of like, this is what he wants to tell you. You see, now that's a unique viewpoint, but you never hear that from anybody. You see, still more to impress the mind. The Etruscans, no. Things they did in their easy centuries are as natural and as easy as breathing. They leave the breast breathing freely and pleasantly with a certain fullness of life. Even the tombs, and that's true Etruscan quality, ease, naturalness. We like this, you see. We respond to them. And an abundance of life. No need to force the mind or soul in any direction. He hasn't got the answer to all things. He doesn't pretend to give you a theology. He just says he wants something easy, natural, and full of life. But look, everything that the Etruscans gave the tombs have been wiped out. One goes out again in the April sunshine into the sunken road between the soft, greasy, group-mounted tombs. As one passes, one glances down the steps of the doorway tombs. It's so still and pleasant and cheerful. The place is so soothing. You see, you had to write this right afterwards. You couldn't write this a year or two later. You have to write it like the next 5 days later or something like that. You have to write it right off because you have to refresh in your mind. And that's another curious thing. One can read about India or Etruria, that's the normal term for Etruscan Etruria, and Benares in India, or the Etruscan necropolis. That is the phallic symbol. There it is. The phallic stone. There are small phallic stones, 7 or 8 inches long, inserted in the rock outside the doors. I told you that. And then there are lingams. A bee puts the phallic stone back into its sack and just pull them out. Big phallic stones probably stood on top of the tumuli and carved very beautifully, sometimes with inscriptions. So he tells you all about that. I can't go into all that. Look at page 20. And perhaps in the insistence of these two symbols, what two symbols? I think he's talking about the womb, the arx, as he calls it, in the previous paragraph, and the phallus. I told you we're going to get into this stuff here. In the Etruscan world, we can see the reason for the utter destruction and annihilation of the Etruscan consciousness. The New World wanted to rid itself of these fatal dominant symbols of the old world, the old physical world. So he's explaining to us what happened to this old world. The pre-Greek, pre-Roman, pre-Christian world. The world we know. The Etruscan consciousness was rooted quite blithely in these symbols, the phallus and the arcs. So the whole consciousness, the whole Etruscan pulse and rhythm must be wiped out. Now we see it again under the blue heavens where the larks are singing in the hot April sky. Why the Romans called the Etruscan vicious? He's back to his first sentence, isn't he? Even in their palmy days, you see, you're back to his sarcasm, the Romans were not saints. They thought they ought to be. They hated the phalanx and the arcs because they wanted empire, dominion, power. Read the Apocalypse in the New Testament. Power and so on. And above all, riches, social gain. You cannot dance gaily to the double flute and at the sea's first flower child. And at the same time, conquer nations or rake in large sums of money. To the greedy man, everybody that's in the way of his greed is vice and crime. Well, those are pretty tough words, as you see, and he's got it all from looking at the Etruscan tombs. I've got to move along here if I can. You don't mind. You're bored, I'm sure, with the whole thing anyway. Let's go on to page 22. You can read the stuff yourself. The last paragraph there, I think he talks about going to a museum and so on. And when you sit in the post automobile, what's the post automobile? That's the bus that takes you back at the end of the day, the post bus. To be rattled down to the station about 4 o'clock in the sunny afternoon, he's got there, you see, he did it. You'll probably see the bus surrounded by a dozen buxom, handsome women I don't know about today, saying goodbye to one of their citizenesses, and in the full, dark, handsome, jovial faces, surely you will see the luster still of the life-loving Etruscans. There's some level Greek eyebrows, but sure there are the other vivid, warm faces, still jovial with Etruscan vitality, beautiful with the mystery of the unrifled art, ripe with the phallic knowledge and the Etruscan carelessness. Nobody can write like that. You know, just spontaneously. I mean, I don't know what he means half the time, but the point is it's totally fresh, different, unique in his own. I don't think all his writing is great. But a book like this is quite astonishing. Nobody knows this book. I didn't read this book in college. I picked it up one day when I was on the road somewhere and I said, my God, you know, how come nobody taught this book at the university? I don't know why. Because universities are what he's describing here. Anyway, I do it for you guys because I thought you might enjoy it. Now we're going to go in the next to Tarquina, or Tarquinia. What's in Tarquinia? That's further up the road. I've got my blackboard here, or my whiteboard, I'm going to call it, so I can actually draw you a map. In Italy, it's easy to draw. Oh, I didn't do a good job. That's it. It's not very good. It's not very good. You know, it's like a big shoe. And here's Rome. So he goes over here to Vetri, and then he goes up here to Tarquina. And Florence is over here. And Pisa is like, no, not Pisa, no, Pisa's over here. Anyway, there's another town here, I can't remember that's quite famous. But what is Siena? Siena, right, Siena. Look at me, I'm falling to pieces. Okay, I'm trying to get through this book in the next 40 minutes so that we can start on the chosen. So, talks right away on page 25 about, as usual, natural things. Gets to lattice pulley in the left in the wood that forms part of the great park. The nightingales have already begun to whistle, and one can see many rose-colored cyclamens glowing on the earth in the evening light. Hey, you guys, I don't even know what a cyclamen is. You see, I'm just a dumbbell. It makes you feel actually like you're inferior. Because he knows. And say, so what? Well, it's nice not to feel stupid. I recommend if you can learn some of these things, you will be not unhappy that you did so. Anyway, so it would be good to go through his work, just look at all the different flowers he names. Lattice plot still is there today. You go from Rome out to the seacoast. One of those ugly little places on the Roman coast consisting of new concrete villas, sort of like you get to drive down to Baja or someplace. New concrete hotels, kiosks, bathing establishment, bareness, non-existent for 10 months in the year, seething solid with fleshy bathers in July and August. I think he describes it pretty well, then and now in many places. Now it was deserted, quite deserted. B and I lay on the gray lava, and he describes the scene. Okay, I can't do all of that. He talks about the history of the area. I'll let you do that. And how the Etruscans fit in on page 27. The Etruscan civilization seems to shoot, perhaps the last from the prehistoric Mediterranean world. No doubt the two religions had the same root. Probably the Aborigines, which caused the Villanobans, but we don't want to get into that, formed willingly a sort of religious aristocracy. And the Etruscan, I don't know what he's talking about here, but you can read that. There was never an Etruscan nation, only in historical times, a great league of tribes. From the shadow of the prehistoric world emerged dying religions. This is a religious book. That have not yet invented gods or goddesses. This is before gods and goddesses. But live, see, what do they live by? The religions before gods and goddesses. They live by the mystery of the elemental powers of the universe. That's what he wants to get back to. The complex vitalities of what we feebly call nature. There's his environmental nature, religion, if you want to call it that. And the Etruscan religion was certainly one of these. So how do you find what this is? Having read all that you can learn, most of the suggestions contradicting each other, and then look sensitively, look at things sensitively. Look sensitively at the tombs and the Etruscans, things that are left. One must accept one's own resultant feeling. How do you decide what it is? You have to look sensitively at things. And he says in the next page, this was part of their viciousness, a great annoyance to their loving and harmless neighbor, the law-abiding Romans. And so he's always got it in for the Romans, and I can share his contempt for Roman civilization. Personally, I feel that he's absolutely right. One of the first people that actually says it. I talked about the flowers on the coastline, but one of the things you see that you feel, and that if you go to Italy, you'll still feel that. In parts of Mexico, you might feel it. What happened to a lot of these places? They were put upon desolation to the triumphant trump of the mosquito. What's the triumphant trump of the mosquito? Malaria took over all these places. It wasn't until malaria was cleaned out of the. I went one time to the seacoast near Florence. My wife and I, before we were married, and so on, we were traveling around, and we stayed in this little hotel or whatever it was, and near the sea. They don't have screens in Europe, I mean, you just get bit in like places like the Greek islands or places like that. They'll give you a little thing to burn, a little sort of thing that's supposed to burn and chase the things away. Yeah, well, you better burn and close all the windows, because if you open the windows and let them in, they're going to come in and kill you. And even a place like Italy, no screens. In Italy, there's not a screen in the whole country, I don't think. And there are mosquitoes in Italy. Let me tell you, go to Florence in the summertime, if you open the window of your hotel, you'll get it. You'll get it good and proper, man. Go to Scandinavia, go to Denmark, right? You'll get it. They have curtains, that they sort of put around you a little bit. No screens. This is insane. That's all I can tell you. It's enough to keep you home. But anyway, the triumphant trump of the mosquito is malaria, and that's what, ruined much of the life here. Okay, so he doesn't like Lattice Poli. Look at those poor rats at Lattice Poli had seen me and B go to the sea and sit on the sand for a half hour. Who are these poor rats? Italian officials, policemen and things. The kind of people you guys like too, that ruined, what were you talking about, Signal Hill or someplace? The kind of people are always prowling around looking to give you a ticket. Anyway, he said, probably I should have spent the night in prison and been bullied by half a dozen low bullies, he says, if I hadn't been carrying my passport. Why are officials always such fools, even when there's no war on? What could they imagine we're doing? Yeah, there it is. That's what I was talking about. Why are officials always such fools? He doesn't like modern fascist Rome and Italy and so on at the time that he's there, and he doesn't like, he speaks about the fascist regime, you see 29. The fascist regime, however, glorying in the Italian origins of Italy, has now struck out, and so on and so forth. So he doesn't like, let's go. He talks about the Etruscans making small temples like little houses. We've heard all this before. Wooden temples, small, dainty, fragile, and evanescent as flowers. Again, the flower comparison. And here it is again. Gay, dancing creatures. Talking about the murals. Rows of ducks, round faces like the sun. There seems to have been in the Etruscan instinct a real desire to preserve the natural humor of life. And then he says here, why is mankind, womankind, such a craving to be imposed upon? Why do they like things to, make them feel puny? Why this lust of their imposing creeds, imposing deeds, imposing buildings, imposing language, imposing works of art? It's all an imposition. A weariness at last. Give us things that are alive and flexible, which won't last too long and become an obstruction and weariness. Even Michelangelo becomes at last a lump and a burden and a bore. It's hard to see past him. No one ever said things like that. Nobody criticizes Michelangelo. Maybe he shouldn't be criticized. But his criticism is not. It's boring, it's enough, it's overpowering. I can't, There's an old saying that my father-in-law used to tell me when I was young and I visited his house. He loved this one thing. He would apparently, I guess it was Diogenes in ancient Greek civilization, who always had a lantern who was with a light looking for an honest man. I think that's who it was. In any case, finally Alexander the Great rode by. He was sitting by the side of the road. Whether this is a real story or not, I don't know, because I never found this anywhere else except from his lips. And so Alexander the Great came on his way to his great conquests in the east. And he rode by Diogenes, and he stopped, and I guess he spoke to Diogenes, who was sitting by the side of the road, and asked him what he could do for him, because Alexander liked philosophers and was sensitive to philosophy. And he said to him, "Stand aside, man. You're blocking the light of the sun." Now, I don't know if that's a real one, but that's something what Lawrence is saying. Enough. Okay, I can appreciate your great artistry. Okay, he doesn't like museums, 27. If only we would realize and not tear things from their settings. Well, natural things. Museums, and they are wrong. If one must have museums, let them be small, and above all, let them be local. Not like these big museums that you trudge through, like the Louvre or the Metropolitan, and after a while you get so tired and bored you can't even appreciate what's there. It's all lined up in these great halls, one thing after the other. Finally, if you go to a museum, you really only have to go to see 1, 2, 3 things, pick out a few things and see them. Otherwise, you start tearing through them like you're in a track meet. Because you want to get out and have your coffee or the light of the sun. But you're afraid to tell anyone that's how you feel. Because that means you're just a Philistine, a plebeian, insensitive person to art. It isn't that. The art is stultifies you. You can't appreciate it. Give me a little museum, except with 1 or 2 things, and okay, fine. Done. there's something into what he says, you see. I think you will agree. And he's prepared to say it. Okay. It's a relief, page 36, to think that even the slaves and the luxuriousness of the Etruscans had their remains decently stored in jars and laid in a sacred place. Apparently the vicious Etruscans had nothing comparable to the vast dead pits, which he already alluded to previously, outside Rome, beside the great highway, in which the bodies of slaves were just promiscuously flung. He says it then again. What I've been telling you is his message. It's all a question of sensitiveness. And here's a man who is fully masculine, as you can see, but he's sensitive. Brute force, overbearing may make a terrific effect, but in the end, that which lives by delicate sensitiveness. If you want to pull out his messages here, I'm pulling them out for you. Page 36. If it were a question of brute force on a single human baby would survive for a fortnight. It is the grass, again Whitman, in the field, most frail of all things that supports all life all the time. But for the green grass, no empire would rise. Okay, he's getting carried away. No man would eat bread, etc. Hercules, Napoleon, Henry Ford was the big industrialist, like back in those days, would alike be denied existence. Brute force crushes many plants. Anyway, and before Buddha, the pyramids. What's the pyramids compared with the daisies? And before the Buddha or Jesus spoke, the nightingale. Here's his environmental sensitivity. And long after the words of Jesus and Buddha are gone into oblivion, the nightingale will still see. So this is a total pagan, isn't he? He's a modern person too, this flower child. Because it is neither preaching nor teaching nor commanding nor urging, it's just singing like Whitman portrays it. And in the beginning was not a word but a chirp. Anyway, because the Romans took life out of the Etruscans, because a fool kills a nightingale with a stone, is he therefore greater than the nightingale? Not he. Remember I told you wrote an essay on the death of a porcupine in New Mexico? Rome fell on the Roman phenomenon with it. Italy today is far more Etruscan, Tuscany and so on in its pulse than Roman. It will always be so. The Etruscan element is like the grass of the field with the sprouting corn. Well, you see, he sees it here. Now, he's going to get deeper into it in the next page, 29 here still, I think. Or he gets into I guess he's in a museum. And he sees the navel and all these things he's looking at. And they hold the patera or the mundum, a saucer with a raised knob in the center. So now he's going to tell you about the symbol. It's a round saucer that is being held with a round knob in the middle. You'll see it in a lot of the paintings, which represent the round germ of heaven and earth. It stands for the plasm also of the living cell with its nucleus. See, and he just knows it all. I don't know how. Which is the individual God at the beginning, which remains alive and broken to the end. The eternal, here's the word quick. Quick of all things, which divides and subdivides, so that it becomes like the goose we were talking about, the sun of the firmament, the lotus of the waters, and so on and so forth. So, you have to read that yourself, I can't do it all. Each created living thing has its own unfailing quick. So within each man is the quick of him. When he's a baby and when he's old, the same quick. No one ever used that word as far as I'm aware of, never has since. Some spark, unborn, undying, vivid life electron. And that is what is symbolized in this patera. That's what it means, he tells you. Is he wrong? I don't know. He didn't read it in any guidebook. He's probably not wrong. And so on. Okay, you can read those pages. Let me go on here. Let's go on. Okay, so that's the end of that section. Page, I guess, 42 or 43 here. It's useless to look in Etruscan things for uplift. If you want uplift, go to Greek and the Gothic. If you want mass, go to Romans. They're, big domes and arches and all that. But if you love the odd, spontaneous forms that are never to be standardized, go to the Etruscans. And then he talks about that the museums are forms. Okay, now he's going to go to the actual painted tombs. Part 3, page 43. He's with a guide. All this hill in front of the guide is tombs, all tombs, the city of the dead. He's in Tarquinia. We walk across the water. I guess he was in the museum there, and now he's going to the tombs. I've been to these tombs, but I told you they've since been ruined. They've got electric lights in them that you push a button and they make a horrid noise, and they're all covered with bulletproof glass, and you know, it's horrible. This is the necropolis. Once it had many a tumulus and street of tombs. Now there's no sign of any tomb. You just go down to the earth and suddenly you see these incredible paintings. He only has a guide with a lamp. There's a dark little hole in the ground, but the guide's lamp begins to flare up, page 44, and we find ourselves in a little chamber. It's the tomb of hunting and fishing. Now this is one of the most spectacular tombs. You have a picture of it. I don't know if you can open up to it. It's this one here. But I think you guys have it in color. Can you find what page that's on? Tomb of Hunting and Fishing. Let's see. Well, you can't find it, but here it is. Guess you don't have any color. Is that the picture you guys have?
What picture?
Oh, you find
What
it.
figure is it?
Figure 16 and 15. You see, he's going to say this is quick with life, and as you can see, it really is. There's birds flying, there's guys in boats, there's guys diving off hills. There's just, the whole thing is like vivid with life. You see what he's responding to, and this is in a tomb painting. Let me see if I can, now I've lost my place helping you guys. Oh, God, now where am I? You killed me here. Okay, here I am. It's a small and gay and quick with life. Oh, let's go back a bit here. Oh, we got to go back to the beginning of this description. So called from the pictures on the walls and supposed to date from the 6th century BC. It's badly damaged. Yet in the dimness we perceive, what do we see? He describes it really beautifully. Flights of birds flying through the haze with the draught of life still in their wings. See what he's responding to? Life. Not big buildings, not altars, not Gothic cathedrals, not pyramids. And as we take heart and look closer, we see the little room is frescoed all around with hazy sky and sea, with birds flying and fishes leaping and little men hunting and fishing, rowing in boats. The lower part of the wall is all blue-green sea with silhouette surface that ripples all around the room, and from the sea rises tall rock, off which a naked man, we can see that, shadowy but still distinct, beautifully and cleanly, diving into the sea while a companion climbs up the rock after him, and on the water, a boat, waits with the rested oars in it, 3 men watching the diver, the middle man standing up naked, holding the boat, holding out his arms. Meanwhile, a great dolphin leaps behind the boat. A flight of birds soars upwards to pass the rock in the clear air. And above all, from the bands of color that border the wall, top hang the regular loops of garlands, flowers, leaves, buds, berries, garlands which belong to maidens, women, which represent the flowery circle of the female life and sex. Men are nearly always painted a darkish red, I told you, with this, which is the color of many Italians when they go naked in the sun, as the Etruscans went. Women are colored paler because women did not go naked in the sun. And in Italy today, the prows of the boat still have these painted eyes on them. The prow of the boat has a beautiful painted eye. If you go to these little seaside towns down in Sicily and places, you'll see them. And then here, one dolphin is diving down, the birds fly, page 30, I don't know what page, page 46. It's all small, gay, and quick with life. Spontaneous, as only young life can be. If only it were not so much damage, one would be happy, because here is the real Etruscan liveliness and naturalness. It is not impressive or grand, but if you are content with just a sense of the quick ripple of life, then here it is. Further along, he is talking now about another scene with a slave boy and a musician. You can look at the picture. The scene is natural as life, and yet it has a heavy archaic fullness of meaning. At the same time, the dead man it's a banqueting scene, banqueting in the underworld. For the underworld of the Etruscans was a gay place, while the living feasted out of doors of the tomb, the dead himself feasted in like manner, with a lady to offer him garlands, for the life on earth was so good, the life below could but be a continuance of it. This profound belief in life, acceptance of life, seems characteristic of the Etruscans. Again, the slaves are naked, but they're not the downtrodden menials. Let later Romans say what they will. The slaves in the tomb are surging with full life. We come up the steps, the upper world, out of the darkness. The sea breeze and the sun, the old dog shambles to his feet, the guide blows out his lamp, locks the gate, we set off again, the dog trembling up to get his master's heels. The master speaks to him with soft Italian familiarity, which seems so very different from the spirit of Rome. It's utterly unlike Cerveteri, though the two places are not 40 miles apart. That's page 46. Then he goes into a tomb called the Tomb of the Leopards. Charming, cozy little room. You can see that tomb. It is a lovely, creamy gold. A beautiful color for the background. The walls of the little tomb dance with real delight. The 6th century before Christ, a vivid, life-accepting people. The dancers on the right wall move with a strange, powerful alertness onwards. The cibolo plays the double flute the Etruscans love. The man in the front turns and signals with left hand holding a big wine bowl. Is right, and so they move on. Long sandaled feet past live buried olive trees, swiftly going with their limbs full of life to the tips. The sense of vigorous, strong-bodied liveliness is characteristic of the Etruscans and is somehow beyond art. You cannot think of art, but only life itself. The 6 feasters are bold, full of life like the dancers. And at one point he says there's more life in one Etruscan toe than in most people today. He thinks that, and that's quite interesting. The man at the end is holding up, page 48, between thumb, skipping along every thumb, between thumb and forefinger and egg. So he tells you what the egg is. Later on he's going to tell you about why people were augurs and why they looked for the future in bird flights. And then he's going to tell you about the haruspex. Remember that, I might ask you on an exam. The haruspex, which is the person who reads livers, tell the future, and so on, and why they read the lines on the liver of animals to tell the future. In any case, the dancing really excites him, as you see. Then the egg. The mysterious egg held up by the man at the end, who was no doubt the man who has died. And he's going to tell you that's where your Easter egg comes from, you see. It's a pre-Christian symbol of life. And of course, I guess, resurrection there. And then on page 49, how lovely and still. How lovely these have been and still. The band of dancing figures, the spotted dresses. They are dancing in the open. And then he says, till one remembers the old dictum, every part of the body and of the anima shall know religion, religious book, and be in touch with the gods. In the early days, men smeared themselves with scarlet when they took on their sacred nature. He said red Indians. He means the American Indians still do it, and we know that they do. We read that about Crazy Horse and so forth. When they wish to figure in their sacred and portentous selves, they smear their bodies all over with red. Vermilion is the color of his sacred or potent or god body. So you can read all this yourself. When the Italian today goes naked on the beach, he becomes a lovely dark, ruddy color, dark as any Indian. The Etruscans went a good deal naked. The end wall, 40, I guess it's not, I don't know what page it is, 51 maybe, has a banqueting scene rather damaged but still interesting. We're talking about all the tombs here. The Tomb of the Dead is 52. On the broken wall are the dancing legs of a man, there it is. And there's more life in those Etruscan legs, fragmented as they are, than in whole bodies of men today. That's really quite an interesting statement. And then under the frieze of the dancers is a lotus dado. Now look, man, I'm not a big expert on dados. I never knew what they were until after I read this book, but they're phallic symbols of some kind. And all around the room are dolphins leaping upwards into the rippling seawall, birds fly. Now he's going to tell you about the egg. He holds up the egg of resurrection, 45, within which the germ sleeps as the soul sleeps in the tomb before it breaks its shell. So that's what your Easter egg, because it celebrates Easter, the resurrection day, see? But it's not a Christian symbol, it's a pre-Christian symbol. Talks about the calyx or wine bowl, page 53. That is, again, one of the charms of the Etruscan paintings. They really have the sense of touch. People and creatures are all really in touch. It's one of the rarest qualities of life. There's plenty of pawing and laying hold, but no real touch. He says so many fantastic things here that you can't really catalog them all. The touch does not come from the middle of the human being. There's no soft flow of touch. That's what makes so many of the great masters boring in spite of their clever composition. Here, in the faded Etruscan places. Look, it may not be there. He may be imagining it all. It may just be his sense of religion. But as he puts it, and he sees it, there's a quiet flow of touch that unites the man and woman. Maybe he wants it to be that. And he's just using the tombs to pronounce what his religion is. 54. Look, there's so much here. One tomb after another, faded. You have the pictures of them. Fragments of people at banquets, limbs that dance without dancers, birds that fly into nowhere, lions with devouring heads. Once it was all bright and dancing, the delight of the underwear. See, I don't know why this is an interesting book, because there's so much in it. For no part of us nor of our body shall be which does not feel religion. And so, let's see. The mysterious egg again we have here on page, I don't know what, 52, 53. He's got the egg again. Let's see if I see anything that would be, that we haven't already heard about. Talks about the natural flowering of life. It's so easy for humans, it's not so easy as it sounds. Behind all the Etruscan liveliness was a religion of life. The whole universe lived. So on. The cosmos was one, and the anima, the soul, was one. Anima was the Greek word for soul, moved things. That's where we get the word animal. The old idea of vitality of the universe was evolved long before history began. The vitality of the cosmos. Well, we'll have to have a break here. We'll just do a little bit more after the break, and then we'll have to go on to our next lecture. But just before you break, let me just look at this one page here, 57. You can find a good place to break. He's talking about shining like morning, blazing like a god. And, let's see. Going on still about touch. The sea, page 60, is the vast primordial creature that has a soul also. And the dolphin leaps in and out of it suddenly. That's what the dolphins mean, just like the goose. The dolphin, which gives up the sea's rainbows only when he dies, out he leaps. Then with a head dive back again, he plunges into the sea. He's so much alive, he's like the phallus carrying the fiery spark of the procreation down into the wet darkness of the womb. The diver does the same, carrying like a phallus his small hot spark into the deeps of death. And the sea will give up her dead like dolphins leap out and have the rainbow within them. It's the same of the goose and so on. And then he goes on about the duck. And when Lawrence talks about a duck, it's not like any duck you ever saw. The duck does not live down within the water as the fish does. The fish is the anima. That's why Jesus is presented as the fish. You know, you see these cars with Jesus on them as the fish. The animate life, the very clue, that's a pre-Christian symbol too. The clue to the vast sea, the watery element. That's what it all means. For this reason, Jesus was represented in the first Christian centuries as a fish. Jesus was the anima, the vast, moist, ever-yielding element. But the duck has no subaqueous nature. as the fish. It swims upon the waters. It's hot-blooded, belonging to the red flame of the animal body of life, but it dives under the water, preens itself upon the flood, so it became to man the symbol of that part of himself which delights in the waters and dives in, rises up, shakes its wings. It's the symbol of man's own phallus and phallic life. So you see a man holding in his hand the hot, soft, alert duck, offering it to the maiden, etc., etc., etc. Well, if you ever heard anyone talk about a duck like that, you're a better person than I. Well, great. I can write about this in an exam for me, right? You were very excited about that. Okay, Jen, you can leave. It's more or less more of the same. I want to keep you if you.